You asked me to, and Dominic's here, we're going to present a little informational piece about municipal budgeting. So isn't that exciting? Come on, they're like, yes. So Dominic and I are going to, independently of course, because we do a lot of things together despite what people read about in the paper, but we still have separate budgets. So the first thing I'd like to just briefly go over is we're really busy at this time, and it occurred to me as a member, a fellow Rotarian said, why are you so busy in January, or why are you busy in December? And most people don't understand that our budgeting process is probably the biggest policy piece our councils and select boards have to work on. And we usually start in the fall. I don't know exactly when Dominic starts, but I start in September, talking to each of our department heads, and you track it all year, but really the push starts in the fall when we're planning, is each department on track for the current year, and what should we start planning for the subsequent years. So we start in September. We often have a lot of extra meetings in December and January, and on your tables I put a copy of our town warning, which is the 6 articles we are going to be asking our taxpayers in the town of St. Albans to consider approving on town meeting day. So we do all this because state law says you have to have the warning into the town clerk by a certain date in January, and this year it was like the last week of January. So even though town meeting is, you know, the first Tuesday in March, it's as late as it's ever going to be. It's on March 7th this year. We have to order ballots ahead of time, get our town reports going. So most of us have already done that. Now we're just waiting for the town reports to be printed and for people to then be notified that the ballots are in. So I'm going to just briefly go over our budget, and then I guess Dominic's going to do his. We didn't do a lot of pre-planning on this, I guess, which is really obvious. So on each table, and as was reported in the messenger, the town of St. Albans should be able to maintain a level municipal rate next year. So I say that very carefully because right now, if you look at our expenses year to year, it's up a little bit. We have a fairly small budget. It's a $4 million budget. It's not small if you're paying it, and Bob and I obviously share in that pain, but we very carefully go over each department, and almost every department was level funded for us except for Department of Public Works. The $130,000 difference is primarily due to us funding some stormwater matching funds. So by that we have, in 2012, become an MS4 impaired municipality, which means we have to very strategically address how we're going to deal with stormwater. We did a lot of planning to get to this stage, but this year we decided to put some money in our budget so that we could go after some grants. And also there's just some every year expenses now attributed to stormwater. The city and town started a stormwater, it's called a RSEP, or a Regional Stormwater Education Program, where we're trying to reach out to all of our constituents to first educate, and then guide to better practices. How and when should you wash your car? And every little bit does help. We still have spring cleanup days where we go to our new dog park at Hardack and other places just to clean up dog poop. It's a fact. A lot of people curb their dogs and they don't all clean it up. So our tax increase for this coming year, and we're calling it FY18, is largely attributed to stormwater. We didn't change anything dramatically in any of our departments. There's only 6 articles, 5 of which you probably see on the ballot every year. And so I think that's kind of it. I think we'll let Dominic give the city version, and then you guys can ask us both questions, if that's good with you.
And Carrie, I think you should add in, you did invite other town administrators to come.
I did.
If anybody doesn't see your town administrator here, like me, get after them because they were invited.
Yeah, so we did reach out to Highgate, Swanton Town, Swanton Village. I didn't actually contact Georgia. I was trying to stick within our cable area because I'm hoping that a lot of people don't necessarily call. I know the budget isn't exciting. I like doing it, but most people don't go, hey, I really want to talk about your budget. They don't call, they don't email. But it's important that you understand that there's a lot of work that goes into it from every municipal employee's parts, including department heads. They're looking at every expense that we have to try to get as much as we can for our tax dollars. So we're very conscious of the fact that our budget and our revenues come from the taxpayers. Yes, sir.
Carrie, what percentage of our tax dollar goes to schools?
I use the number 20%. About 20% of it is municipal, 80% goes to the ed fund. That's correct. So out of every dollar that you pay in taxes, we're going to get about 20 cents, and we're doing what we can with it. We have, over 40 miles of roads. This morning was a challenge. We had an equipment issue, so parts of Hathaway Point Road didn't get plowed, in the same schedule we always keep, but things like that. Yep. So we do a lot with that section of our budget. All right. You want to take over for a bit?
Well, thanks for the opportunity. To Tom's question, in the city, it's about 60-40. The tax rate and municipal spending is a little bit different. This is a good opportunity for us because in addition to the budget, there's two additional articles. So I thought I might just touch briefly on our process, how we get to here, and then talk about some of the things specifically that are on the warning in March. I like this because Carrie mentions, the budget's probably the most important policy document, and to that end, after the new city council is elected in March, we start getting organized, elected a council president, and sometime in the spring have a goal-setting session in which the council comes in and says, these are the 10 things that are important to us, and that kind of becomes our playbook for everything that comes up throughout the course of the year, but in particular the budget. And surprisingly, that changes a fair bit from year to year based on things that come off the list and also people that come on the council. Once that's in place, the staff spend most of the fall refining it, and then we deliver it to the city council sometime between Christmas and New Year's. It's kind of a Merry Christmas present. And then there's a finance committee meeting, which is a subcommittee of the council. 3 of them, they offer a recommendation to the council, and depending on the year and what's in it, it's either done or that's the beginning of 30 days of negotiation. This year it was done, and I think that reflects the fact that it was pretty closely connected to the priorities that the council had laid out in their goal-setting session. One of the big drivers this year in the city budget was what's going on with emergency services and regional dispatch. That industry is changing a lot, and we had, a total of about $150,000 that dropped out of our budget due to communities seeking to get their dispatch services elsewhere. So that caused us to make some staffing changes and to up the portion of the budget that was contributed by city taxpayers. Some of the other things that are at play in the city budget is, bottom line, I suppose, is the budget's up 3%, taxes are up 3%. Year to year. 1.5 of that, though, is due to sidewalks. The voters approved a $4.95 million neighborhood sidewalk project that will roll out over the next 3 or 4 years. And so, budget to budget, it's really a 1.5% increase. That 1.5% has a couple of new items in it this year. One of the most exciting, I think, is some seed funding for a marketing campaign. So there's $35,000 in there to begin continue the rebranding of the city and also the region. And we're hoping to have some conversations with our large employers and others who would benefit from rebranding of St. Albans. We think we have a great story to tell, from our schools to our neighborhoods to what's going on in the downtown. We have a lot to offer. We're seeing that in the real estate market, but we think we really need to start changing the story and the image that's out there. One of the other big aspects of the warning coming up in March is a wastewater treatment bond. We're asking the voters to authorize up to $18 million for improvements to the wastewater treatment facility and associated infrastructure. So 80% of that $15 million is due to useful life issues. It's been 33 years since we last upgraded the plant, and much like that car or anything else, all of the pumps and filters and fabrics and media that make the plant operate are just at the end of their useful life. Every 20 years we take a look at the plant, and when we did our 20-year evaluation this time, it said it's time for another infusion of cash. So 15 of that is for useful life issues, and the balance cuts our phosphorus in half. So it seems also every 20 years or so we need to cut our phosphorus in half. This is in accordance with the new management plan for Lake Champlain. The TMDL gets us down from 0.5 to 0.2. We've done a whole lot of testing to see could we get to the limits of technology at 0.1. We think we'll likely hit that many days, but the guaranteed number with this technology that we're going with is 0.2. We're looking at several different financing options for that upgrade. We're looking, got some great indications from USDA that we might be able to get some of their financing, which is very, very attractive. Bottom line, for the anticipated impact for the typical residential customer is between 1% and 2.5% per year, spread out over roughly 7 years, depending on which financing option is ultimately available. So we think those are increases that move what we anticipate inflation being. It's really it's a must-pass bond. It's a must-pass project. This isn't something that you can mess around with. It's not a discretionary item. When your plant begins, you get beyond the useful life, then you get into really expensive emergency upgrades that are ordered by the state to happen yesterday. Other communities are in that standpoint, that position. We don't want to get there. The final item asks for voter permission to redirect some existing TIF debt. It's not new debt. We have $16 million in existing tax increment financing for the garage and all the associated improvements. This $500,000, up to $500,000, will be used to complete the first phase of the Federal Street project. So it's the Lake and Federal intersection, it's Market Street, it's Catherine Street, it's realigning and streetscape along that first block. We had always intended to fix the intersection itself as some of the right-of-way discussions continued on longer. That intersection project got merged with the Federal Street project, and so we think it's best to be very clear that we're going to now call this the Federal Street project and get voter authorization to use the TIF funds for it. So that is it in a nutshell, and I would welcome any questions for Carrie or myself.
For Carrie, I'm going.
A general question, is it true that the city purchased that block of buildings that the Moon Shadow used to be in?
Yes.
And two other questions are related to that. How's that fit into the budget, and what are the plans for the building?
It's a great question. So, doesn't impact the budget really at all. When the city sold the land for the new state office building, we were able to accumulate a redevelopment fund of about $2.5 million. The state didn't incur increased costs to that project because we brought a tax credit to the table that was worth about $3 million. So that deal was $500,000 richer, and we got some catalyst funds for our redevelopment fund. And there was a number of reasons why we did that, but one of the things we realized was to have the redevelopment occur in the way we wanted to occur, we needed to grease the skids, form public-private partnerships, be able to react to opportunities such as what happened across from City Hall. We just went through a RFP process for the buildings on Stebbins Street, which were also part of that sale. And we got 3 proposals, and the council's going to be considering those Monday night. We anticipate doing a similar process with the 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels across the street. You know, one of the questions is will we look to do, that was our priority, not the Stebbins ones, they just came as part of the sale.
Right.
Will we look to do something that had more of a public-private partnership, i.e. a bigger building that we incent, or will we look to just transition out of it and get our money back? I think the inclination is probably the former. You know, it's a unique opportunity to have them all assembled under one ownership, and we'll see what comes in and how we can make something exciting happen.
Right.
So, yeah, Win?
I used to know more about it than I do now. Probably advancing age has caused that to diminish my memory. Share with us the TIF, how that state-local partnership works.
So the best way to think about the TIF is a public partnership between the state of Vermont and a municipality. You can get into that business if a state board approves it, Vermont Economic Progress Council. You go into them and they say, this is our plan, these are the public projects that we want to do, and these are the private projects that we think will result from it. You got to have nexus between the two, and they say, yeah, that's a good plan. And it's a pretty rigorous process, but at the end of it, if they approve it, they say for 20 years you can have 75% of the proceeds that otherwise would have gone to the education fund to pay for bonds that will complete these public projects. So the Ed Fund, I would argue, is a partner with absolutely no risk. They're not putting up any money. For 20 years, they get 25% of anything new that comes in. And after 20 years, they get 100% of the proceeds that comes in. So across the country, it's the classic economic development tool that everybody uses. It's harder to use here because of the Ed Fund and the fact that we're all interrelated. And there's so much budgetary pressure in Montpelier. But that's the nut of it. You know, the Ed Fund has no risk. The local voters approve everything and are on the hook for everything. But they get access to funds that otherwise they would have no access to use, and they can only be used for the projects that the board authorizes.
Yeah, does that realize lower taxes for the municipalities that have TIFs?
No, it's eventually in that a broader tax base results in lower taxes.
Okay.
But, you know, right now, we're putting, you know, so your tax bill has a municipal portion and an education portion. We're putting in 100% of the municipal funds taxing the increment, the new stuff coming in, and 75% on the education side. So, you know, it's, you know, another way to answer that is the city's grand list, which was anemic in 2012, before the hotel is on, has 60 million in new investment in the last 5 years. That's insane. That never happens without the TIF. Now, in the short term, that's pretty much all going to pay the bonds that made it happen. But in the long term, I mean, the best time to be a city manager in St. Albans is 20 years from now, not now. Because the bonds are all paid off and your grand list is robust.
Obviously, people walking into our office that are looking to come to the area, I want to say hats off to both of you, because people come in relocating, they're looking for the chamber, they're looking for, you know, where they can go to, housing, and all that kind of stuff. And the public is, I mean, when they drive through St. Albans and stop into the office, they comment about the parks, they comment about the lake, they comment about all that stuff, and you guys have done a good job of, you know, buying some of the older buildings, taking them down, replacing them with much nicer looking buildings, and, you know, St. Albans City looks a whole lot different than it did 5 years ago. So,
Thank you.
kudos.
Thank you. John?
Dominic, as I understand, you're going to be doing some more sidewalk construction. I mean, you've done a huge amount, all of Route 7, Lake Street, Fairfield Street. There's more coming?
There's more coming, and actually, what's yet to come is bigger than what we've done so far. What we've done so far, had a lot of utility work, underground work associated with it, and it was
Fairfield.
much more disruptive because of that, and it was on major arteries, and it was downtown. And one of the things that comes out of that city council planning session is they're all about the downtown, that they really want to see some neighborhood activity. And so that's why we bought the house up on Diamond Street that was, such a eyesore up there. And now all the infrastructure projects are moving out into the neighborhoods. So this year it's all on the west side. And there's a plan and a map that I can get to. I should put it up on our website. But over the next 4 years, you're going to see a segment of the city, just sidewalks and curbs, nothing underground, be pretty sizable. Nothing like what we've seen so far.
Tom?
Carrie, this question is for you, and it pertains to sidewalks. Isn't there some traction in the town to mandate sidewalks on all our future developments?
There is, I think last year in February, when we passed the most recent update on our bylaws, it was mandated in our growth areas. And that came at the urging, and I guess I'll call it urging, of Rise Vermont, working with some members of the public to push some of our boards into including that. I don't think that's a significant change from, the past 10 or 20 years, where there's been intermittent support for it. Now there's the whole town and all its boards, I feel like at this point, support putting in some infrastructure. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like. We're near the end of a master sidewalk update. We had a plan, but it was over 10 years old. So the Planning Commission's been working with a consultant from Du Bois and King to actually have a written prioritized list that we can start applying for grants, put in our planning process, and actually start building. So that's significant. Some of the state agencies still, I think even 2-3 years ago when we applied for grants, didn't think we were serious about that. So that is, thanks for asking that question, because we're serious about it now. We're actually doing a study. Well, we've applied for a grant. We believe we're going to get it with the help of Chip from the city. The city and town are going in to study the feasibility of connecting where the sidewalk ends at the north part of the city. And from that area to Walmart, there's people walking in that section of the road often, and it's really unsafe. So we're looking at how we can best get people from here to there. And that will also probably be publicized, but it's not done yet.
Trolley cars.
Yes.
Carrie, Tim Smith had commented when he was here for the Development Corporation about the new development thing that's going on, or new business based on new investment. Can you elaborate on that at all? I think that's really...
I don't have all those numbers in my head, but there's 3 businesses doing 3 major renovations. Ben & Jerry's, I think, they added a line, and they're also adding a structure. Milan and Peerless are all expanding this spring. Peerless is taking down their 85,000 square foot, a warehouse section, largely warehouse section, and putting up a 90,000 square foot section, but they're building another floor, which is going to allow them to have a lot more capacity. And Milan is expanding, but I can't, warehouse space, I believe. So it's really exciting that within the park, we have 3 major investments being made this spring.
great for the town.
And also, I think Tim has also announced this, but Energizer was officially sold to a developer. That closing went through at the end of December.
Is there some left?
Yeah, I got a question for both of you. And it has to do
Yeah,
with the water sewer expansion and the federal monies that you're applying for. The USDA, I understand, can give up to 45%, but the most likely number is 25% funding. Have the 2 communities talked at all about the likelihood, if you made a joint application, whether or not you'd be more apt to get the 45%? Therefore, if you cooperate, maybe you can realize an additional $5 or $6 million?
Thank you for that question.
And you're in trouble.
That's fabulous. I'm going to let Dominic answer that because I don't think I've ever seen that application.
we've got, I'm prepping, as you may know, for some depositions coming up in a couple of weeks.
I'm recused.
And our counsel recently said, Dom, the best answer is always no.
I do not recall.
So, no, we haven't had that conversation.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody. We appreciate the
Thanks.
interest.
Thank you very much.